This place has got to be haunted because even if I don't touch these glass cases at all, they still get really dirty really quickly. But who cares about my spontaneous cleaning? We need to talk about the lack of SMGs or PDWs in my collection. Of course, I have things like the MP7 that you see behind me. I have a P90, some MP5s, and an MP40 of all things. But I should really expand on this category of replicas. So we'll be doing that today, with a hot new piece on the market from G&G Armament. This is the MXC-9, and it looks a lot like the PCC-45 that we went over a couple years ago. Now, there's no secret that I have a soft spot for G&G Armament. I actually have a catalog with little stars next to all the things I want from them, like their GMG-42 or their C7A1. I just like the variety that they offer. And today, we'll be taking a look at some of that variety with the Enhanced Edition MXC-9, or the Multi-Caliber Extreme Compact 9. Now, of course, we're going to be going over the pros, cons, interesting traits and features, along with performance and all the stuff that goes on inside the gearbox. But we begin this entire overview to see if this is really worth its $400 price tag, where we always begin with the unboxing. Sliding this G&G box into frame, I'll say right away that I like the new look that these boxes are shipping out with. It's still the same old cardboard box, but it's different from what I've seen from G&G over years and years. If you inspect it, you'll see the carry handle on top and some notable features mentioned along with these nice gold badges on the lid. However, when you open that lid, the paperwork will be the first thing you'll see. This consists of a warranty card from G&G and the manual booklet, of course. The manual will go over all the features and functions like it should, as well as showcasing an exploded view of all the main parts. I even noticed a page dedicated to the battery connections and 4-column midcap magazines. Next, we have 2 polymer midcap magazines, a standard 130 round model and an extended 170 round mag. Then finally, we have the G&G MXC-9 to pull away from the orange plastic tray. Under the tray, as expected from the rattle of the box, a fittingly short unjamming/cleaning rod can be had. But setting the box to the side and looking over the MXC-9, it's pretty clear that yes, indeed, it's a smaller PCC-45 for the most part. Actually, if you look at the left side of the lower receiver, you'll see as plain as day that it says PCC-45 next to the other engraved trademarks. I'll admit that this is kinda lame to not see a properly marked MXC-9, but it's smart on G&G's part to reuse the receivers that they already have. And that probably brings product costs down for all that we know. Moving on, the majority of the MXC-9 is made from the same polymer that we felt on the Generation 2 combat machines, so it's dense when it needs to be. Nothing at all rattles, but there is some bend to sections of the body and in the stock. It's not a whole lot, but enough to make some creaking noises if you try. Some things are made out of metal, like the M-LOK rail, but of course all the important parts are as well, like screws, selector switches, trigger, QD sling points, and sights. Unlike the rather large amplifier at the aluminum outer barrel's end, that sadly is completely orange for the US models, and is the cheapest feeling part on this G&G release. This build quality, however, keeps the weight low at 4 pounds 13.1 ounces or 2190 grams without a magazine. I then weighed the magazines next, and of course these polymer mags are basically weightless, so don't fret over having to carry several of them. I think you'll survive. Splitting the MXC-9 into portions, we start with the handguard and barrel setup. A setup that's capped by an obnoxiously federally mandated orange tip that we Americans have to deal with. Remember, we only need a 1/4 inch of orange here, but G&G Armament have had their fair share of confiscations by US Customs like several other airsoft manufacturers, so they went a little overboard, you can say. This amplifier is even pinned in place, so you'll want to grab a Dremel if you need to get it off. Nonetheless, this plastic amplifier really gives this replica some pop. You won't be sneaking shots or competing with anything built for stealth, But then again, this isn't made for that kind of stuff anyway. Under this amplifier, standard 14mm counterclockwise threads are available on the aluminum outer barrel for when a tracer unit or a barrel extension is needed. Helping with accuracy inside, an aluminum 128mm long, 6.08mm wide inner barrel is backed up by the same good old plastic rotary hop-up that I'd expect to see with this G&G, since it is just a smaller PCC-45. The inner barrel is the same as in the G&G ARP-9, so the Laylax 128mm inner barrel would be an available upgrade to make use of. Moving on, the hop-up is easy to adjust and will click as you make your selections, plus the bolt can be locked to the rear by pulling back the cammed ambidextrous charging handles to make adjustments even easier. Just be sure to hit either of the bolt releases to send the mock bolt face back home. Moving back to the front, the 6-inch slanted aluminum M-locked railed handguard comes with a built-in hand stop underneath and a steel QD sling slot connected to the left side. You have points for any of your M-lock accessories at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock, but you only have 2 slots each, unless you want to use the Picatinny rail up top for other accessories. At the front and rear of the rail are standard G&G aluminum and steel backup sights. Adjustable for elevation up front with a dial, and adjustable for windage only at the rear with a larger dial. Feel free to flip these up when you need them or remove them entirely to get access to the 11.5-inch rail. I'd say a holographic sight would probably look best on this piece, but that's just my opinion. Looking at the controls and features of the polymer receivers, it's rather comfortable again. If you've ever used any M4, then you mostly know how to run an MXC-9. There's ambidextrous everything, from the selector switches to the bolt releases and charging handles. If you're left-handed, then you'll be totally fine when using this. The magazine release is a large chunk of polymer and is really easy to hit and manipulate. Magazines won't just drop out of the MXC-9, but they're not too hard to pull away from the flared mag well. And did I mention that this feels really comfortable? As you just hold the MXC-9, you might notice that your trigger finger rests comfortably in this groove cutout on the mag well. This isn't unique to the MXC-9, but I'm happy to see this reused from the PCC-45. When you do make use of the metal flat trigger, you might be impressed with the response rate. With the right 11.1 LiPo battery, you shouldn't have any issues with the trigger in semi. And just like all the other G&Gs that share the same electronic trigger unit and MOSFET system, full auto can be switched to 3-round burst or even 5-round burst by holding the trigger down in semi until you hear a beep. What can I say? It's all about user friendliness. The upper receiver isn't as decked out in controls like the lower is, but you do get some lightning cuts down the sides and a laser-etched caliber marking on the bolt. Something to take note of though is the swappable steel sling point that's quite thick. And if you look right here, you might see the utterly useless side-folding stock hook between the bolt and the M-lock handguard. This is another piece that's carried over since G&G is reusing PCC-45 lowers. But since the stock doesn't even hook into this point in any way when it's folded, it remains a useless feature. Then if you take a look at the grip, you might notice an Easter egg. Look closely because a bunch of G&G Gs can be seen. That's a nice little touch. But then we move on to the patented MXC-9 stock. Patented because G&G got really fed up with all the copycat problems that they saw after producing their ARP-9, I'm told. This stock, dubbed the Conductive Hinge folding stock, is made from nylon fiber reinforced injection molded polymer as you'd expect, and is connected to the receiver by these 2 screws. Remove them and the quick change spring system will be exposed. As a bonus, this same stock can be added to the G&G PCC-45 if you happen to own one. This stock was thought out to be as adjustable as possible, with 6 lengths available with the push of a button, a 4-position cheek rest, and a tight folding mechanism that locks into the receiver just enough to not swing back out by itself, while being able to be pulled away again when you need it. Other features include a thick rubber butt pad, 2 more QD sling slots to go with the swappable point up front, and small Type Tamiya battery connections that are revealed after pressing the button under the cheek rest. The battery space is big enough to fit something like this candy bar style LiPo, or even a skinny stick battery with the stock extended. But whatever you're able to fit in here, make sure it's an 11.1 LiPo so as to maintain proper operation of the electronics inside. You'll save yourself from a lot of trouble. Now, I heard that Dean's connections may be found under this compartment in the future depending on where you live. That would be a nice little bonus that I think G&G should just make across the line in the future. An interesting quirk to make note of when it comes to this stock is that if you have the steel sling loop on the right side, you won't be able to fold the stock. All the controls, however, will be available when the stock is folded, so if you intend to run it folded, then you'll be fine. I do like this setup, especially since I don't see any wires when the stock is folded. It's all very clean on the outside, even with the 1 or 2 oddities I pointed out as we looked over the features. I didn't forget about the magazines though. These lightweight magazines can feel as bulky as the PCC-45 magazines, which are as bulky as the UMP-45 mags. The quadruple stack function that these boast has something to do with that for sure. Another trait, this time rather embarrassing, will cause a significant gap between the followers and the opening of the magazine that will feed into the hop-up. When your magazine runs dry and you remove it from the MXC-9, you'll hear this rattle. The reason for this would be the 18 BBs that didn't make it to the hop-up since the followers ended their path inside the magazine before the BBs could be picked up by the hop-up. If you use the PCC-45 magazines, then you won't have to deal with this. But then again, the PCC-45 midcaps can only hold 110 rounds, not 130 or 170. I like these magazines because of the viewports on each side and how they look like aftermarket magazines from the get-go. But this Maraca side effect is really annoying. You do win some and lose some, I guess. You can always gravity feed the BBs into the hop-up if you absolutely need to, but that never looks good to anyone. I do appreciate getting 2 magazines in the box though. It gives me a bit of a taste of which magazines I should get more of. Of course, I would want more extended 170 round magazines like most other people out there would, but I also would entertain the idea of magazines with an extended follower like other G&G magazines, even if that means a drop in round count. Now, the G&G MXC-9 is doing rather well so far, even with the issues that I've mentioned. But let's go ahead and pull the gearbox and barrel assembly out and take a look at the finer details. Disassembly remains familiar for any experienced techs out there that have worked on any M4 platform. You will have to remove the magazine release, bolt catch, and selector switches, as well as a couple body pins, but it's pretty easy to understand. And the gearbox itself is the G2 gearbox, as you could guess. Various staple G&G traits are showcased inside the MXC-9's gearbox, like the quick change steel spring guide that comes with 4 tabs to hold it into the back of the gearbox shell and a ball bearing to relieve stress on the linear main spring. I'll mention now that another familiarity to G&G veterans out there would be the spring bounce that this replica gives out with each shot. This MXC-9 has a really loud spring twang to it, and in a bit, maybe we'll figure out why. With the gearbox shell split open now, we can see the 8mm bearings a bit more and all the guts like the 18:1 gear set or the compression parts. I honestly wasn't too impressed by the air seal this time around. The rear ported aluminum cylinder is standard like all the other version 2 parts in here. Nothing is proprietary, but inside the piston, you won't see a ball bearing, which might explain a bit of that spring reverb that I was talking about. Looking at the piston head, it's vented and it hosts a rubber O-ring around it as it should, and the 11 teeth are in great shape. And of course, the pickup tooth is made from metal. The cylinder head is nothing special this time around. Only 1 O-ring around it can be found and a simple dampener pad. The nozzle is also basic, along with the tappet plate. I am bummed out about that rather poor air seal, but that's easily upgradable later. No delayer chip can be found on the sector gear, however the ECS system is sitting tightly with the metal flat trigger that's also common in many G&Gs. I like these G2 shells for the wire coverings. That makes putting all these parts back together much easier, and I like the radius cuts along the cylinder window corners. Even the 25K Ifrit motor is a nice addition. These motors are a bit old now, but they're still doing a great job at powering some of G&G's most popular models, so why change it now? The only thing I would really say that you should look into modding would be the compression set, unless you want to jump your rate of fire up first. Looking at the barrel and hop up, again we have a 128mm long, 6.08mm wide aluminum inner barrel with a plastic rotary hop up connected to it. The barrel itself will slide out of the upper receiver with an aluminum stabilizer ring behind a small O-ring to keep it from falling off. The bucking is another tried and true G&G, the blue bucking with 2 points of contact that many builders keep using in their setups around the world, so that should help with range later on. Finally, I want to show off angle of engagement. I know that every tech out there likes their AoE a little differently, just like shimming, so I'll just let you decide how good or how bad the AoE is here. Shimming was pretty good for a stock replica in my opinion, as no real force had to be applied to get a clean roll from the gears. But then putting the gearbox all back together and grabbing a bottle of 0.2, 0.28 gram, and 0.32 gram BBs, I was surprised to see my MXC-9 firing a little over US CQB velocities. After seeing how hot other MXC-9s are, I expected around 330 feet per second with 0.2s. I'll chalk this up to the wear-in period. I don't think a spring swap will be needed because I think it'll drop a few FPS as a few thousand BBs are run through the system. But these recordings were made right out of the box. Then at the D14 range, your common CQB engagement distances will be a walk in the park. No surprise there. Then at 150 feet, or about 45 meters, the MXC-9 will get hits back to back. A blind man can make these hits. So we then pushed things out a little more to 200 feet, or 60 meters. But we got the same story. I'll admit I was surprised just how well this SMG was doing. So we tried 250 feet, or 76 meters with 0.28 grams, and that's when we finally saw the limits. Most of the power was gone, but if you get lucky, you might get one hit. Try some burst fire if you need to. Then with all other functions and features covered, along with performance, decibel readings peaked as you can see. This is a really loud AEG with its plastic amplifier and short barrel, and a lot of people told me so, over and over. If you're running a G&G Armament MXC-9 on a field or in an arena, people will definitely know when you're around. So then this leads us down to our final conclusions on the G&G MXC-9, and I'll start by saying that I like it, clearly, even more than the PCC-45. It's a compact model that has a lot of features I like G&G for. The trigger is exceptional, range and accuracy is outstanding, despite the compression issues, and I really like the windows on the sides of the magazines. It's familiar in controls, but different in appearance. So we bring in my rating system that is dependent on the replica in question's power source, meaning I'm not going to be rating AEGs the same as spring-powered or gas blowbacks. AEGs get rated with other AEGs. But with that said, let's run down performance first. The MXC-9 did a lot of things right. Range was very surprising and accuracy was tight, meaning in CQB, where this is meant to be in, you'll dominate. Trigger responses won't leave you hanging, and the burst functions provided by G&G's ETU are going to be useful to a lot of people out there. I didn't have any mechanical or electric failures, but the magazines do hold the MXC-9 back just a little bit. They're still good magazines, however a lot of the BBs go wasted, so I'm giving the MXC-9 an 8 out of 10. Everyday play should be good since the MXC-9 is easy to understand. Battery space is much bigger this time around, and everything is lightweight, but strong like a lot of similar G&G models. I hate that I have to fight with a solid metal pin to get to the threads if I want to add on any muzzle devices like a trace unit though, and I don't see this being a lot of people's first replica. But if it was, I'd say they would have a really good time. The nearly proprietary nature of the magazines does bring the score down a little bit. However, a 7 out of 10 is still pretty good for a unique model. As for collector value though, well, G&G has a lot of collector pieces on their catalog, many of which I love, but I wouldn't put an ARP-9 in the same glass case as an FNC, or with a chromed M1 Garand, nor would I put a PCC-45 or an MXC-9 in those cases. They're really good everyday replicas, like how a modern Corolla is a great daily driver, but I'd get a lot more attention with a lot of other stuff once the new factor wears off. So the MXC-9 scores a 6 out of 10. I guess you could say it's just neutral. Build quality is the same that I've seen over and over again with many G&G replicas, but you can tell that corners were cut here and there to save money when in production. It's unfair to really judge the big orange amplifier since it'll all be black where it's allowed to be. But things like the useless stock hook on the right side is a little embarrassing, don't you think? Still, the stock has a lot of options and abilities, and the body is still strong enough to take everyday abuse. Internals were greased accordingly, but someone needs to rework the compression set. For that, I'll give the MXC-9 a 7 out of 10. Then for worthiness. For the price of $400, I get really good performance, 2 magazines, good battery storage, customization capabilities, and an easy to work on platform. Everything on the inside is all standard version 2 stuff. If you want to rip it all out along with the bearings and redo it all, then go for it. The economy is still going through a lot right now in the US, so I can understand the industry-wide price hike, but $400 for the MXC-9? While the PCC-45 goes for about $60 or even almost $100 less? That's a tough sale. So I give the MXC-9 a 7 out of 10. Add the scores up, and this G&G armament is at a 33 out of 50. If you only care about ease of use and performance, then the MXC-9 is an absolute great contender. They would absolutely crush the E&L Central Line AKs that I reviewed previously. Those AKs only beat out the MXC-9 in rating because of their hyper-realistic build quality and overall realism, as well as collectability. If the MXC-9 hadn't reused a lower, and if the designers could figure out how to use the BBs that are never fed into the hop-up, then that would have really helped out. But take my ratings as you will. I still expect to see a lot of these in the future when they become more available around the world. And around the world, these G&Gs are definitely going. You might find these at your local retailers right now or online, just like all the other reviews that have been made about the MXC-9 so far. So go ahead and check those out if you want even more information so you can get even more up to speed. But as for me, well, I'd like to thank you all for watching and for hitting the like button if you have already. If not, then definitely do that now if you really enjoyed this review. Also, I'd like to invite you to become a channel member if you want to get some exclusive perks and directly support the USAirsoft channel and everything else I do here. If you'd like to become a member, then be sure to hit the join button right next to the subscribe button down below or on the channel homepage. Also subscribe now if you haven't already. I'll even add a link in the comments to make things a little easier. But until that next video drops from the city of Dallas, Texas, this has been Scott Hollenbeck, and I will be sure to see you all next time. Right when I was going to show off the trigger, I run out. But technically I didn't run out because of the amount of BBs that stay in the magazine even if you run out. So one trick I learned, and this is really janky, but if you really absolutely need the BBs that are left in the magazine but can't feed into the hop-up, you could always just gravity feed them. Of course, this is really janky and I wouldn't recommend it, but there's a lot of BBs that get completely wasted because of this large gap, but there has to be some downsides to having quadruple stack magazines, sadly. Now for one of the most painful scenes in all of my reviews, let's see just how responsive this trigger can be, which means a lot of fluttering. really, really good actually. How do I switch from full auto to 3-round burst? Very easy. Go ahead and pull a trigger on semi and hold it down. You'll hear it beep very soon. There we go. Now go ahead and switch back to full auto, and now you have 3-round burst. If you want to switch back, same process, go ahead and pull the trigger on semi and hold it down until you hear the beep. I'll go ahead and skip it this time. All right, and then switch back to full auto, and you should have normal full auto again. And I can hear the battery dying. Oh well. Okay, we are trying this again. Okay, we are going to try this again. Okay, we are going to try this again. Because the stupid battery died the first time, and I had almost gotten the entire intro finished in one take. Okay. Alright, let's try this again.